Hey, what's going on, role players? It's the Bard here, and welcome back to the corner. So before we get started, just a couple shout outs. So the first shout out goes to Mornblade Gaming. If you're into your long, in-depth adventure videos that you really want to settle in for the long haul, then go check him out. There's some cool stuff on his channel. On the flip side, if you prefer short, snappy, and to the point, go check out howtod&d. Some really great videos covering all kinds of topics, just really quick, really condensed, and how to make them work straight away. So some really good stuff there. Thanks, boys, for joining the channel. Nice to have you on board. Look forward to seeing more of your own vids. And guys, if you want to go and check out these two, links will be in the descriptions below. Just make sure you come back to me in the end. Okay, and with that being said, let's get on with today's topic.
This is how you remind me of what I really am. This is how you remind me.
So is alignment an unnecessary mechanic now? Is it something we're not going to need anymore? If you look in the book, it tells you that alignment is basically just a couple of characteristics put together in a specific way that give you a broad overview of what a character's general moral attitude is. But it doesn't really tell you anything more than that. But it's really kind of just a catch-all category which doesn't really do any character any favours. And the reason I say it doesn't do you any favours is because the inevitable question is always going to come up from another gamer at the table. They're just going to turn around and say, okay, what's your character name? Sure, that's cool. What's your alignment? And then, you can either say, I am this, or if you want to keep it a secret, you'll say, I'm not telling. In which case, they will instantly think you've got something to hide. And it's not that alignment is necessarily a bad thing, but it's too narrow a focus for complex character development. A character's motivations and their moral behaviour should speak to you through the role-playing. So being given a broad sort of checkbox thing that you can just kind of pigeonhole a character in and say, that character is this based on these arbitrary traits that they can't control, is kind of wrong. Getting into the concept of moral equivalencies, good and evil, law and chaos, it suddenly becomes this point-scoring exercise. You're having to justify every action you make just because you're trying to stick within a particular alignment framework, and it's not really practical for the game. It kind of seems to me that alignment has always been a crutch for the game system throughout all of its editions. If you look at the concept of a alignment scanning spell, like a divination, it's going to tell you what the character's alignment is, or abilities like slippery mind or things like that, which prevent people from discovering your alignment. There are also other mechanics like magical items, which only work in the hands of particularly aligned characters. Now, whilst that is true to a degree, it's really more of a case of willpower than alignment. If you have the force of will to bring an item under your control, you would do so. If a item was sentient to the point where it could choose its master, is it not also sentient to the point where you would be in a battle of wills against it to gain dominance over said item in order to assert your will and therefore make yourself stronger? If you had the force of will to dominate a person in that way, why couldn't you do it with a sentient magic item?
It's not like you to say sorry. I was waiting on a different story. This time
So words are very plastic things. The words themselves they're quite neutral, but it's the connotations and the context around them which gives form to the words. So things like good and evil, not only do they have connotations that go with them, they're very subjective in terms. And the reason I bring this up is because when you make a statement about your character, for example, my character is lawful good, you're making a statement about your character that people are going to interpret in their own subjective way. So what then happens is they create an illusion in their mind about what your character is. And then when you do something that goes counter to the image that they've constructed for themselves, they start to question your character's motives. They say things to you like, I didn't think your character would do something like that. By giving our role-playing characters labels like this, we're almost kind of forcing ourselves to play in a specific way. We're not really exploring what it is to be involved in the story. We're reacting to the story in the way that we think we should, as an alignment dictates, but not as we really feel we would in a situation where there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of danger, there's a lot of potential for harm or, corruption. So we don't really face those moral complications or those moral dilemmas in the same way as we would if we were going at it from the perspective of a blank slate. Because we already have this idea in our heads that our character is lawful good, then we must go and rescue everyone, we must slay all the evil, and we must make sure that corruption doesn't rise again. But when you're given a moral dilemma and you have no alignment, you actually start to think about all the options. You actually think, is it better for me to take the money and forget I didn't see anything? It would help me in the end. And, at the same time, because you're making those moral decisions, if you were to, leave perhaps a few adventures down the road, the game would naturally progress into a wide-ranging thing that covers most of the campaign. So perhaps something could build from it. So I think perhaps giving ourselves these strict rules to work within isn't always a good idea. Okay, so we'll go back to the slave camp scenario. Let's take, for instance, you've got a group of orcs and they have a bunch of human and elven slaves. Now, you would go in and you would probably kill all the orcs, and then you would leave, and then you would carry on continuing adventuring. But, what if, you weren't confined by the concept of alignment, in which case the orcs might say to you, you can have this gold if you just leave us about our business, and off you go. And then, like I say, a few adventures down the road, when you come back, those humans and elves might have been, magically ensorcelled to attack you in such a way by an orc shaman. Conversely, what if we flip the races around? What if you have a bunch of humans and elves who have enslaved orcs? And it's an incredibly weird concept, because we already have in our minds that elves and humans are usually good and that orcs are usually evil, because it's already built into our perception of those creatures because of the alignment that we've been reading about them all this time. Orcs are evil, humans are usually neutral or can vary in alignment, elves are typically chaotic good. So when you get a situation like that, it doesn't really compute. And then maybe you start to justify yourself. Perhaps you start to justify your actions. So you go, okay, well, perhaps those humans have captured those orcs because they were raiders or something. Because we've already kind of got it in our head that the orcs are bad because of the alignment that is written for them in the book. So if we absolutely must use an alignment, unless you're a character that has a specific alignment requirement, like Paladin for example, if you're not one of those, then I would say go with just true neutral, because it gives you a branch where you can explore any aspect of your character that you like, because you're not confined with being good. You have the choice between good and evil, and you have the choice between law and chaos. If you know for a fact that you're an absolute steadfast, determined character in one aspect, then yeah, you could go with maybe lawful over chaos, but consider the benefits of neutrality in all aspects, because to be honest, there's a bunch of routes you would like to explore as a character, but in the back of your mind you can't explore them because your character sheet says specifically on it, you do this because that's what you've chosen. I usually find that the alignments can be quite contradictory almost in certain cases, because if you take a rogue for example, most of the time it says any non-lawful because you're breaking the law. But I would like you to consider the fact that if you were planning a burglary or planning a robbery as a thief character, you would need to be meticulous. You would need to plan when and where to strike. You would need to make sure that you weren't going to get seen. You would need to consider the time of day, you would need to consider if the area is guarded, you would need to plan your route, you would need to consider, are there going to be casualties, So even though you are non-lawful in the actual physical law sense, lawful alignment actually represents other things like planning as well. So law isn't really, like I said, the words become very plastic. And when you start to look at it in those terms, you kind of realize, well, actually, rogues are quite lawful to a degree, because if they're going to be successful, they need to really follow a strict and dedicated plan in order to make something work most of the time. This isn't always the case, but it can often be the case. I mean, also, if you really want to make alignment a thing, perhaps you could consider rewards for playing your alignment in a constructive or entertaining manner. I mean, for example, if you're, the heroic paladin, that's, common example, and you act heroically in a situation that, everyone else would run away from, perhaps you should get some extra form of reward. Maybe you get like, a small 1% experience boost, or perhaps you get like a free reroll somewhere along the line. Something we're experimenting with, and it's a new game actually that we're playing at the moment, and it's called the Dresden Files. And what it does is, what they have you doing is they have you build a story as part of the game. Every player writes down a bit of their story, and then every other player kind of adds a little bit to their story, so that everyone kind of features in each person's narrative. And what then happens is you draw experience from that, and you draw like an aspect. And when you play your aspects, you then get rewarded for it. And I think it's a really interesting way of not only making the characters more rounded and more full, but it also gives you the GM a jumping off point in order to create interesting adventure hooks. And at the same time, because you've looked at the story and you've read it and you said, right, I'll take an aspect of that and then play it, whenever you play that, you get a reward for it. But at the same time, the GM can also turn around to you and say, well, this is part of your character, and therefore I'm going to take the, either this good part of it or this bad part of it, and either use it for you or against you. So it really gives you a very rounded character development, and it's something I really like. And it's taken a bit of a while for us to build the characters, because we had to write a whole backstory, literally write the backstory as part of our character development between us. But I think it's something that GMs could consider doing more. I don't necessarily think it's something that all games need to add to their game mechanic, but I do think it's something that player groups in any kind of game should just consider. Why are they working together? It does help to avoid the cliche you meet in a tavern, but at the same time it gives a lot of context to characters, and it does give them a lot of depth. And it also means that you don't need that alignment. People start to make their decisions based on your actions, based on the things they've seen you doing, based on the history that you already have together. And it's a really, really nice narrative, story-driven way of creating characters and games. So I really think it's something that we should consider implementing into almost every game we do, even if it's only in a small way.
I said I love you and I swear I still do. It must have been so bad.
Alright guys, thanks for listening. So remember, if you want to go and check out some of those channels that I mentioned earlier, the links will be down in the description below. Also, I suggest you go and have a look at the Dresden Files. It's a really nice game, very nicely laid out, very good humour. If you're looking for a good modern day adventure with some sorcery thrown in there as well, then it's a good read. And some of the novels that have been made for it as well, I've heard some very good things about. So thanks for listening. Make sure you get subscribed, like, comment, and I will see you guys next time at the gaming table.